A very good day, and welcome to this webinar of the Gulf Research Center entitled Escalation and Diplomacy, Gulf Perspectives on the Israel-Iran War. So what we want to do today is to examine in just a little bit more detail repercussions of the recent attack by Israel on Iran, Iran's subsequent retaliation, including, of course, also the missiles launched on US bases located in Qatar, the overall role and involvement of the US, and what this means also for going forward, and to provide some analysis on these issues, on what has happened specifically from a GCC perspective. My name is Christian Koch. I'm Director of Research at the Gulf Research Center, as well as the Executive Manager of the Gulf Research Center Foundation in Brussels, from where I am joining you today. And it's getting quite hot in Brussels, as it is in most of Europe. So it's my pleasure to moderate today's webinar. I think it's pretty much safe to say that the broader Middle East certainly finds itself at a potential juncture point. A ceasefire may have temporarily halted the military escalation, but the region now faces urgent questions of whether this moment will lead to renewed diplomatic engagement or actually mark the beginning of a deeper and strategic breakdown. And in particular, I think the Gulf states, many of whom have recalibrated their foreign policies in recent years more towards forms of dialogue, de-escalation, promoting regional stability, and finding the mechanisms for such, really face the complex task of preserving any diplomatic momentum while addressing the pressing security concerns. So in our webinar today, we want to assess the unfolding dynamics and the implication this holds for the Gulf region. Some of the key questions that we have identified include really what is the core assessment and takeaway from the GCC states when it comes to the consequences and repercussions of the recent 12-day war? Where do the main concerns now lie, and what are the most direct and immediate ones? Can the GCC states play a decisive role in shielding their recent diplomatic gains amid this recent surge in tensions? Or what concrete diplomatic, economic, and security tools can the GCC and other regional actors still deploy to prevent a renewed outbreak of conflict? How do these recent events affect Gulf-Iran relations in both the short term and over the coming months? And overall, what is the real-time economic fallout, especially in energy markets, in trade flows, investor confidence, stemming from all these developments? Now, I'm sure our audience will also have a number of other questions as well, but to provide perspectives on these recent events and developments and their meaning, I'm really privileged to be joined by several of my GRC colleagues today, including, of course, the chairman of the Gulf Research Center, Dr. Abdulaziz Sagar, Professor Giacomo Luciani, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Gulf Research Center, Cambridge, Dr. Mustafa Al-Ani, Director of the GRC's Security and Defense Program, Dr. John Swafianakis, our Chief Economist and Head of Economic Research at the GRC, and Professor Saleh Al-Khatlan, our Senior Advisor to the GRC, who is in Riyadh at the moment. Now, we've asked each of our speakers to give us some initial comments of about 7-8 minutes. We will follow this by a round of discussion. Just as a reminder, very briefly, I'll outline the usual housekeeping rules. Once all speakers have provided their remarks, we will open the microphones for questions and comments from our audience. You will be able to join the discussion by raising your hand in the Zoom menu, and I will call on you in the order in which I see those hands being raised. Once I do call on you with your name, we will open the microphone for you, and you will then be able to engage with your question and or comment. Please do identify yourself at the outset with your name and affiliation so that everybody knows who you are. Please also do feel free to put any question or comment in the chat function even while the comments are going on. The GRC team and I will make sure that we will keep track of all the items that are posted here, and panelists will also be able to see the comment or the question that is already put there. Do again keep your question and comment short, precise, so that we can include as many contributions as possible. And finally, translation to and from Arabic is available during today's session. There is a button on your bottom of your screen that once you click on it will provide translation for those that would prefer this option. So with all that being said, can I turn the microphone over to you, Dr. Abdulaziz, please?
Thank you very much, Dr. Christian. What a great pleasure to see everybody on the screen and to thank everybody for taking the time and participating today in our webinar. And also I would like to thank all our audience or the listening participant. They showed interest in this one. Let me start by saying that the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, have condemned. Can I request everybody to put mute in the microphone if you're not speaking? Yes, so that, fine. So the Gulf countries have deeply condemned the aggression by the Israeli against Iran, and they have made sure to state that position very clearly from day one, and they remain very clear. However, prior to that, I think the Gulf countries have clearly stated the following issue. We have nothing to do with what type of regime rules Iran. This is an Iranian people domestic issue. They have the right to choose whatever they want. Second, I think it was important that it was mentioned in case if there is any military, attack by the Israeli or the American, the Gulf countries will not provide their aerospace or sea to be used by any forces. And third, I think it was clear that they have endorsed and supported a political dialogue, and they have, greatly, endorse and support the political discussion, all the 5 rounds that took place between Iran and the US. At the same time, I think it was clear also that they did look at all the American military presence in the region and all the escalation coming out of Israel. They thought this is not for a tour in the region, and they may have a purpose. So this should be taken in serious concentration and so. So I think those messages, they were clear, prior to the 12 days war. However, when the 12 days war started by the Israeli, immediately there was a very clear condemnation by individual country in the Gulf and also by the GCC, which was a clear position. But here we have to differentiate between the two issues. Condemning the Israeli by breaking the international law and attacking the Iran critical facilities and the people and killing innocent people, and also the issue of the nuclear program in Iran. I think Iran is a signatory to NPT like the rest of the Gulf countries. When they signed the JCPOA in 2015, the Gulf countries, despite they were not part of that one, but still they did endorse it, and they were hoping that Iran will fulfill that sort of agreement, which was signed in 2015, which allowed them to do a 300 kilo enrichment at 3.67 almost. That was the deal. However, when the American withdrew from the 5+, I think that have created a new situation. Escalation was well prepared, and there was enough signal saying that escalation, that's the direction, because the Israelis are still insisting for zero enrichment. I think from the Gulf position, we understand the right of Iran of the enrichment, but not the way how they have dealt with the current enrichment, where they went to more than 8,600 kilo from 0 to 20, and also the 286 kilo up to 60%, because 60% is not anything to use for civilian or medical purposes. So that was the level which was raised the concern. However, looking today of what happened, I think we need to see the day after. We need to see. I was very pleased yesterday to hear 2 good statements coming out of the Iranian president talking about the Gulf-Iran relation and how forward he's looking for that to have a good and peaceful relation with the thing. All what we want from Iran today to consider what they have stated themselves before. Iran did state before that they want to non-aggression and non-intervention, and that's exactly what we would like to see from their side happening today. Because if they change their attitude and behavior, and it's becoming like a non-aggression and not a non-intervention, that will bring more stability and security in the region. And if there is more peaceful and security in the region, then we're going to see prosperity, we're going to see growth in Iran and also in the neighboring country. Attacking the Udeid have shifted the position of the Gulf countries to condemn Iran attack against the Udeid, although it's an American base, but it is in a Qatari, in a Gulf state land, which was not acceptable any sort of aggression like this. And although later on it says that it was organized or coordinated between both sides, the timing and so, but still that is a Qatari land and a sovereign state, and the Gulf country did not condemn Iran relation to Russia or to China or to North Korea. That's their sovereign decision, so they should have respected the sovereign decision. I think if we want to move forward today, we can see Iran, being out of the some of the group that they have supported for many years, like Hezbollah, like the Houthi, like the position in Syria, focusing on their own domestic development, reaching out, and the security architecture in the region where no aggression and no intervention, like what Rouhani said in 2019, that will be extremely good one. And I think they will only get a positive signal from the Gulf country to match the positive signal they are sending, because both have interest to have a stabilization, and both have interest to continue. Of course, we are against any aggression against changing the regime in Iran, because that's an Iranian issue, and it's not a position of the Gulf countries. So this is the general view, in my opinion. I think my colleagues here will address the different, subject, from a different angle, and we will be happy to take any sort of question between us and from the audience also there. Today I'm in Geneva. It's extremely hot. It's about 34 centigrade. So this is why I'm without my jacket. So sorry for my colleague who may see it, but I hope we have a great webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz. I think that started as well. You highlighted the deep condemnation at the outset of the Israeli action, but then pointed also to looking at these things in a differentiated way, also in terms of the nuclear program and the nuclear negotiations. I found it interesting at the end when you mentioned the focus on now the way forward, and specifically on potential regional security architecture or maybe mechanism of where we can steer the conversation into that direction. But of course, it remains quite a difficult road ahead. Let me go over and bring Giacomo into the conversation and maybe highlight a little bit also energy-related matters. Giacomo, please.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz. And it's always a pleasure to be joining this exercise. The perhaps surprising thing is that in terms of impact on international energy markets, the happenings in the Middle East have had very little impact. They did not cause any kind of major turmoil in the oil market. A bit of nervousness for LNG supplies, but otherwise not much of an impact. Prices increased temporarily because of speculation. This might have happened. This might have allowed producers in the shale patch in the United States to hedge their future production in the coming months, and so they will, if they manage to do so, they will be able to continue producing at prices that are sufficiently good for them. But otherwise, the big news remains the process of unwinding the OPEC cuts and coming back to the full use of quotas. You might remember that back in January, in our webinar there, then I said that this was a possibility, that Saudi Arabia should decide to stop curtailing production to maintain high prices, mostly because this policy was being eroded and prices were falling anyhow. So it might be more convenient for Saudi Arabia to start increasing its production in the spring, I said. And that's exactly what has happened, not because I said it, but because it was logical, and I think it remains the logical strategy from the point of view of the kingdom. So this strategy, I would expect, will continue. Next week, there is another meeting of OPEC, which will further increase the volumes of oil that will be injected into the market. And this will, of course, have the consequence of weakening prices. How far is difficult to say, but what is essential is that prices must reach a situation, a level that will discourage investment in the oil shale patch in the United States and elsewhere in high-cost oil prospects on the part of the international oil companies. The effects are being seen already. Some international oil companies, notably BP, are facing difficulties. So that is what the strategy of Saudi Aramco is achieving. Now, it is possible that in these conditions and considering the lack of progress on the Ukrainian front, at some point, sanctions against Russia might be further strengthened and implemented with greater rigor. Low prices would facilitate this, of course, and in a sense, this might be welcome for Saudi Arabia, which might then, be able to increase production without a decline in prices that would otherwise happen if Russia keeps on exporting at full capacity as they are doing now. The events in the Middle East have opened a huge issue, as has been said already, with respect to nuclear energy, because nuclear is essential for the future of the region, for all countries, and not just Iran, but several of the countries in the region are pursuing a nuclear capability, civilian nuclear capability, which includes the possibility of enriching uranium. So the issue of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the safeguards of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the role of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the possibility of regional agreements to cooperatively enrich uranium for civilian purposes, all of this is absolutely now top priority on the table. Mariano Grossi yesterday confirmed that the US strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities have not destroyed the Iranian capability. This is what to be expected, and that Iran might come back to enriching uranium in a matter of months, not years. And even if it were years, the fact is that there needs to be a solution for uranium enrichment in the region. And it can only be a collective solution which includes Iran. As a matter of fact, it's almost inescapable that Iran will play a prominent role because it has accumulated expertise, know-how, physical facilities. So it is difficult to argue that all of this is for nothing, and now we start from scratch in a completely different environment. So at some point, this will need to be solved, and it is, I believe, a great priority for the countries in the region. And it will have to feature prominently in discussions and in the diplomacy in the coming months and the years. That is all from me on this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Giacomo. You just one quick follow-up here. You mentioned that the oil
You're
price will have
muted.
to reach a level where it cuts into investment for shale oil producers. What would that price be approximately?
Well, it has been estimated that a lot of shale oil would stop flowing if the price fell towards $50 per barrel. So I think it's
Right.
reasonable to expect that the price might go at 60, perhaps a couple of dollars below 60. But I think we would start seeing significant curtailment of production in the United States already at that level. Of course, this is not welcome in a sense for President Trump, but there is no way out. I mean, he has called for more production and for lower prices, and so there is no alternative. If prices are lower, shale production will decline. Except if he embarks in a policy of tighter sanctions on Russia. Tighter sanctions on Iran is not easy because of Chinese interests. There are countervailing forces all over the place. It's not easy to change the situation.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And I'm sure we're going to come back to the whole issue of enrichment and nuclear proliferation. That was certainly going to be a topic as we continue this discussion. Mustafa, do you want to come in and give us a little bit of also different security perspective and what you see as the main developments and results of the recent crisis? If you can just unmute yourself, sorry.
I will cover the military intelligence side of the operation because I think this is the central issue here. We heard in the past few days a lot of discussion about whether the operation was successful operation in achieving its objectives. And here we assume the operation has one central objective, the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program. Yes, okay, the missiles could be a target, toppling the regime for the Israeli could be a target, but let's take the central issue, the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program. We heard a lot of discussion, for political motivation, possibly, especially in the United States, a lot of people doubting that the campaign achieved its objective. I believe the campaign achieved at least 90% of its objective, military-wise, for a very simple reason. People tend to forget that this is not a simple operation which born a day or two before. It is not a reaction. It is a planned attack which was under study and review and intelligence collection for 10 years, at least 10 years, on both sides, by the way. We know the Central Command and US Central Command start planning in 2004 for this sort of attack. So here you're talking about a joint capability, intelligence capability of the US and the Israeli. And here you're talking about one of the best and a huge capability, which cannot compare to any other operation. So anybody can, want to doubt that the operation was not, didn't achieve its objective. I will question their, their doubt, because here you're talking, as it said, it is well-planned operation. Secondly, the operation is a success of intelligence. Military is one thing, but when you ask a pilot to go to a target, he's going to and drop his bomb. He go to the target and drop his bomb according to information. And here we witness one of the most successful intelligence operation in the history. Iranian leader killed in their bed, in their own homes, okay? So this is not a simple planning. It is a huge planning. The question of the key installation, the 3 key installation. The estimate which I saw 4 or 5 years ago, Frodo need 4 bomb, the kind of this bunker buster. An average 4 bomb. By the way, Frodo, yes, is deep in the mountain, but it's not a big place. The Iranian couldn't cave a huge place. It is a very limited space. And you're talking about, the estimate was 4 bomb. The president decided to drop 13 bomb, just to make sure that he is not going to be accused of leading an unsuccessful operation. So the question here is whether the Iranian nuclear program destroyed or not. I don't have any doubt that the Iranian nuclear program destroyed at least 90% of the infrastructure of the program. The question here is it Iran can recover? I doubt Iran can recover from this sort of destruction, and especially with the promise that the American will come back and the Israeli will come back. So the objective is not only to destroy the program, it's to prevent the program from, re-emerging again or rebuilding the program. And there is a promise on the top leadership, the American and the Israeli, they will do the job. So here we're talking about open-ending conflict. The conflict is not, if the Iranian decide to resume the program, we have the conflict going to be resumed again. And the Israeli going to behave as they behave against Lebanon, Syria, Gaza. They can revisit anytime they want. So here you're talking about the objective is to make sure that the Iranian will not have such capability. Here in the region, well, the people don't believe that the Iranian have a military nuclear ambition. For me, the Iranian from day one, they never been interested in a civilian program. The objective is the same like the Pakistani and the India, to start a civilian nuclear program, then feeding on it a military program, a secret military program. And I have no doubt the Iranian objective is to build a bomb. They look at Pakistan, they look at India, they look at Israel, they look at North Korea, and they think that this is a way they can go and achieve the objective. The simple question which have been asked in the Security Council, what do you do with the 60% of enrichment? Because there is no known civilian use for this sort of enrichment, absolutely none. The maximum use for civilian is 20%. what are you going to do with the 60? Unless the intention is to go. So again, anybody doubt that the Iranian have the intention to build a bomb, I will question this issue. Now, is the toppling the regime was objective? Apparently, it was an objective for the Israeli, but not for the American. And the Iranian crisis proved the American leading. It is like the Ukrainian crisis. Everybody was talking that the American is no longer is influential, especially after the end of the Cold War. Ukrainian crisis and the Iranian crisis proved that without the leadership of the United States, you cannot do a lot. Without the American entering the operation and destroying the three nuclear site, I think that the Israeli will not be able to achieve their objective. So here in if you're talking about the Iranian victory, well, the Iranian victory come in two forms. First, the regime survived, although its legitimacy become questionable and will be questionable in the future, because you have no regime which can, after 900 attack, cannot bring one plane from the Israelis. So they have no air defense. They are unable to have all the leadership, military leadership, scientific leadership disappeared. They can't do anything about it. So the only thing what you can say, the Iranian are scored some victory, is basically the American changed their opinion about toppling the regime, and they decide the removing of the regime is not objective. The other one is the Iranian kept some sort of offensive capability. To the last day, the Iranian were able to fire some, although it's reduced capability, but they still have some sort of capability to use the missiles. So in general, I think the operation was successful, but you cannot judge this sort of operation successful unless it is going to, the objective of preventing the Iranian from reviving their nuclear program must be dealt with effectively. We didn't wish in the region, we didn't wish to see this scenario. We hope that the Iranian will, agree on some sort of diplomatic solution, but we are not a decision maker in this crisis, and we decide to stand with the international law and condemn the aggression. This is the most we can do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mustafa. So let me also just a quick follow-up. So your assessment is also that the majority of the centrifuges, because there's been speculation, of course, a lot in the media about where those centrifuges are and whether the Iranians had moved it ahead of time of some of the bombings. But your assessment is that most of them then are destroyed and unlikely to be rebuilt.
It is unlikely they are able to revive. It's like the Iraqi after the attack in 1981. The Iranian nuclear program, there is estimation between $70 to $100 billion, the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And neither the economy can support this sort of cost. And again, if your enemy is saying that they're going to revisit again and they will destroy any, you are under the problem. Iran, what it proved this crisis, prove Iran, living under the radar of intelligence. And it's not now, it's not in the confrontation. You're talking about 5-10 years ago, the Israeli intelligence and the Western intelligence is very active. So there is a mechanism to prevent the Iranian from restoring the program. And I think the Iranian, apart from the propaganda, the Iranian will have no ability to rebuild the program as it was. The question here, I disagree with the assessment of President Trump that the Iranian were 1 week away from building the bomb. It is not that simple, okay? And the bomb is not only enrichment of uranium, it is more complicated than that.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Very good points there. And I'm sure we'll come back to a number of this. I mean, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into what this means for potential nuclear talks coming up, or are they being considered? But we'll come back to that in a minute. John, back a little bit on the economic side and repercussions, especially also in terms of what does this do to confidence in the region now that we've actually seen some missiles fly at a GCC state? Does that have any impact? But please go ahead, John. And also need you to unmute. Usually on the bottom left. Okay. Maybe you can just keep trying. And in the oh, I see you're unmuted. You were unmuted. There you are. You're
Hello?
unmuted. Yes, we can hear you.
No, okay. All right. The first thing in when a war starts is the communications falling and failing. So let me say a few things. Thank you very much. Let me say a few things about the first round of what we've seen in the 12-day war. My personal assessment is that we're still at the very beginning of the war. We're just taking a break. And this is my personal view, not that of the GRC. So I would like to highlight some of the initial kind of costs to the war. And in the short to medium term, Israel-Iran war poses both opportunities and risks for both of the states, costs, of course, for both Israel and Iran, as well as costs and opportunities for the Gulf. Not so much about the wider Middle East, but that's second round effects. So I would begin by saying what is interesting is in addition to what was said before about oil, is that oil has become depoliticized, and geopolitics of the Middle East is no longer a global concern as much as we think. And sometimes we believe when we study a region that the region is so important. However, analysts outside do perceive that, if there is no major war, there is no World War III and no nuclear war, which seems to be the case, since America is involved now and will continue to be involved, there's no so much of a concern on geopolitics, on the price of oil. It spiked during the first day. It went to 80 for Brent, and then it started going down. And then as the instability continued and concern about the timeline of the war, that went up, and then at the end of the war, prices collapsed back to their high 60s. And in I think a forecasted way, I expect oil prices to go further down, as was said. So what does that mean? One, it means that oil is less of a concern because there is plenty of oil out there. Two, Middle East issues are less of a concern for the international economic analyst community. Yes, there is war, but so what? We care more about what is happening to UK-US trade relations, US-Canada trade relations, China, and what's happening to the US dollar and concerns about the global economy. And that is quite interesting because 15 years ago, 10 years ago, this would not have been the case. And I would argue that although shale seems to be on the decline in terms of rig count, shale has revolutionized the oil market. And since 2015, it has created huge supply chains, plenty of oil that is out there that brings down the price of oil, in addition to Saudi Arabia going into an increase of output game, including the UAE and others. So what does all this mean if oil is at 65, 68, 60, 55, whatever is your pick? Well, for sure, budgets across the region are heavily oil dependent still. They're not diversified. the attempt to diversify is very much dependent on the price of oil. They need oil to diversify. So if you take out oil, there is very little diversification that will happen to the main economies of the GCC, the big ones that are trying to diversify. So higher oil prices would offer clearly a windfall revenues that can support, domestic mega projects, social spending, sovereign wealth fund investments, and so forth. So that creates angst and anxiety. In the case of Saudi Arabia, they're issuing plentiful of debt in order to cover for these asks and requests on mega projects. So the oil dependency is still there, and lower oil also creates opportunities because it also prioritizes what can be done versus what is Instagram related and what is a vision and what is something that could be dreamed of. Countries and economies become far more realistic when oil is at 60 rather than when oil is at 100. Secondly, the impact that we could see, we yet to see it, but it does create secondary effects. And if it is a prolonged conflict, as I believe so, it will be a prolonged conflict. It complicates the Gulf's ambitions to position themselves as stable, neutral platforms for global capital. And we've seen the attempts of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh. They all have sought to become regional business hubs, luring in multinationals, tech firms, and financiers with a promise of geopolitical insulation. However, it only requires for a couple of missiles to either leave Yemen, go to Riyadh, or the opposite from Iran into Abqaiq, as we have seen in 2019, or Abu Dhabi for that matter. So a destabilized Middle East, or at least a destabilized Iran or Israel-Iran, however you put it, especially one marked by open war and uncertainty, undermines the narrative that please come and invest, and we are havens for your money. Of course, related to this, risk premiums rise, investment decisions get delayed, and the region's reputation of this grand allure changes. Again, an impact on airlines. If you are flying or trying to fly during the war, you would see that not only the cost in terms of time is elevated, but also the cost for airlines. So that changes diametrically how things are. And finally, let me say a couple of things. Recently at the GRC, we published a preliminary report on the cost of war for both Israel and Iran. And I think there is something to be said about the cost of war on the economies, but also on the war itself. This war is beginning with a higher defense budget for Israel. Israel's defense budget has increased by 65% as a result of the October 2023 attacks. It was at 27 billion. Now it is at 46 billion. But having said that, the cost on Israel itself is rather huge. Alone, preliminary reports point to a $3 billion cost on infrastructure. There is a cost on the actual hardware for missile protection and aeroplanes that could vary between 10 to $15 billion. And of course, on Iran, decrepit economy that is falling apart constantly, 50-60% inflation with very little growth happening, sanctioned and so forth. And the only opportunity for FX and foreign currency is the exportation of oil. That complicates the dire straits that the Iranian economy is under. Remember that during the war, one of the things that Israel did, which adds to Mustafa's point, this is a campaign that has been planned for many, many years, and there is a plan for many, many years to come if the regime stays, are the cyber attacks on two of the main banks of Iran, which completely destabilized and stopped any transaction happening. And that's really the reason why the internet was cut It was because the cyber attacks that were undertaken by Israel on the Iranian economy. Nobody could take money out. There was no electronic transaction system. No FX could be shared with the outside world. So the Iranian economy was falling and disappearing. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, John. So, I mean, just to clarify, your assessment is that the confidence in the region has been shattered to a degree in terms of investments, and that this will likely continue even, as you said, if there's a prolonged conflict. So it has had an impact on investor confidence.
I think a little bit, but not to the extent that we or others were expecting had we had a similar effect 10 years ago. I think that it's far less than what we thought. And
Okay.
we see the same on the price of oil. People just don't care. And I think it has a combination of causal factors. One is that the analysts do not read history anymore. And two, the market has moved on and there is plenty of oil out there. So if Middle East oil is semi-interrupted, there is a lot of oil out there that is trying to find a hospitable place.
Of course. Okay. Again, I'm sure we'll come back to it a little bit in a little while. Professor Saleh, want to bring you into that discussion now, also about sort of the regional dimensions and what you see as sort of the main consequence of what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Please go ahead. Can you hear me, Professor Saleh? I see you're unmuted, but I do not hear you. Maybe you want to try to briefly sign back in.
How
and we
about
can
now?
bring-
Hear
Oh,
me?
okay, now I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
I go for the headphones. Okay. Thank you. Very interesting point have been said. Let me limit myself to specific points before coming to the GCC.
Yeah.
Strategic perspective. Even though in this part of the world, it's really hard to talk about strategic perspective. Strategic in terms of deep understanding and comprehensive perspective and long-term foresight. These are because the region is always in turmoil, tension, changing policies. So it's really hard for experts to talk about strategy and strategic vision. But still, we still need to analyze and try to understand what has happened and how it is going to go from here. First, I think yes, this war was the most significant threat to the stability and security of the whole region since the war in Iraq 2003. But still, it has some kind of positive impact or outcome, which is this is from a realist point of view. It really weakened the two parties, and as we know, these two parties are the main source of threat to the region. Iran, with its ambition, to influence the region, and with its nuclear program, and Israel with its aggressive, particularly after 7th of October, its aggressive policies toward Palestine and towards its neighbors. So, I mean, weakening Israel and Iran, I think that is a positive development for the whole region. Of course, as Dr. Mustafa has shown, there's a big, debate about how much damage, but still there is the damage. And I think that damage will have some kind of, at least in terms of, thinking, both in Iran and in Israel. The Iranian maybe, I'm sure there's going to be big, discussion and debate in Iran about the war and how, maybe I'm sure we'll have moderate voices there. Okay, is this the right way to go about, future of Iran and regional policies, international relations? Because of the damage that has been done, even reaching the level of threatening the life of the Murshid Khamenei. So that is a good point, a positive input. I mean, in terms of policy making, in Iran, thinking about the consequence of continuing this program. And as Dr. Mustafa said, they were no matter what they say about how much damage. I mean, the Israeli will keep, as long as they will keep going after the program, as long as they see it as an existential threat. As for Israel, I mean, the fact that it came out of this war with some serious damage, I think that will really reflect on their future policies. Imagine they came out without any damage. I think that will really embolden them, and this aggressive policies of Netanyahu and his government. So I mean, having been damaged because of this war, I think that will really maybe restrain them. Let's hope. Okay, that's the first point. The second point. The minute the war stopped them and the ceasefire was announced, we started another war, which is the media war. Both parties claiming victory, and we see it particularly in the on the Iranian side. I mean, the social media is filled with all this major victory. This is Iran is the only country that is capable of stopping the Israelis and giving teaching them a lesson. Of course, some may see this as just for domestic consumption, but I am concerned about this narrative both in Israel and Iran turn into deep let's say beliefs, which will then shape their views and their toward their role and toward the region. In Israel, because of the political system, the nature of political system, and because of the damage they sustained, I think, and the political system give counter argument to this victory argument or narrative. So I think this will be limited, this narrative in Israel. But for Iran, because of the nature of the system, I think this narrative, this victory story will continue, and I think it's going to translate into belief and will strengthen the radical voices in Iran. And the future scenarios, it depends on the perception. First, on two things. First, perception of the two parties towards what has happened and the outcome of this war, and second, on the root causes of the conflict itself. As I said, perception do matter. We know in the international literature, mostly, decision making are not based on facts, but on how leaders perceive facts. So if they can keep seeing that what has happened, it was, the war was, I mean, the damage is just limited, and they won the war. That will really, the two parties will continue the same behavior, negative behavior toward the region, toward their neighbors. The second factor that will really determine the future, the future scenario is as I call them, the root causes. We still, okay, the war stopped, but then we have at least the two major issues. They're still there: the Iranian program, and the Iranians, insist that they will continue this program. And then the other issue, which is Palestine. And then, Israel's war on Gaza and the deprivation and, genocide. These are big issues that will, continue affecting the stability and the security relations of the whole region. Third point is that in the GCC position, Dr. Abdulaziz, explained in details, the GCC position before the war and during the war. So now, and I think the war showed really one of the positive things about this war, if we can say so, is that it, showed in concrete. It's not just a stated position, but they did take collective position, and they express it very clearly, and they communicate, not just issuing a statement, but even communicating with the regional leaders and with international leaders to de-escalate and stop the war from expanding. But then how about the position of the GCC after the war? I think there is a momentum, there is a diplomatic momentum they should build on. And here I can point out to three things that three tracks I think the GCC should follow. First is that they need to engage Iran. And engaging Iran on two issues. First, they have to make it, the GCC, all the 6 GCC countries, they have to make it clear to the Iranian leadership that they will never accept a military nuclear program. And that Iran should really do some, really engage in negotiation to reach some kind of agreement to keep, to give them the right of peaceful use, enrichment, but not to become a, military nuclear power. Second is that they should, this engagement should send a positive message that we can help. We are your neighbors, and we are, relatively speaking, we are influential regionally, internationally. We can help you to break out of this isolation and to get engaged, and in the international, re-engage in the international economy. But that requires you to change your behavior. And then another goal for this engagement, and the engagement, it has to be on all track. Track 1, track 1.5, track 2, and it has to be continuous. The second goal of this, engagement is to try to strengthen the moderate voices in Iran, because the war showed that there are two perspectives. The one by the radicals who are insisting on confrontation and even using whatever military capabilities Iran has to confront Israel and the United States. And then we have another voice, which is presented by the foreign minister, Abbas Karachi, and the president himself, stressing, diplomacy, and engagement. So I think the GCC have a chance now to really, help strengthen these moderate voices. Second track for, diplomatic, efforts by the GCC is toward Israel. I think the GCC, they should continue putting pressure jointly with the international community in Israel to end its war in Gaza and to resume the peace process. And here I think they have a card. The GCC have a card which is very important for Israel, which is normalization. And I'm not saying that future normalization. I know what I'm arguing here is that that for those country already normalized with Israel, the assumption was that normalizing with Israel will lead to will allow them to shape and influence Israel behavior, but it shows that they couldn't. It did not succeed. That assumption is not been realized. Israel is still continue even after normalization. It continues its aggressive policies toward the region. So I think there is need to be a debate within the GCC countries about normalization and using it as a card to pressure Israel. Third point and last point is that this war shows that the GCC need to develop further the GCC security vision for security. We remember that they issued a year ago their vision for security in the regional security, And that vision was really a big, step. But still, it was just, a document containing, general assessment, priorities, goals, policies being taken. But I think it's time now to move toward, let's say, talking about mechanism, turning this vision into a mechanism to maintain peace and protect the stability and security in the GCC, and then try to come up with some kind of, security framework for the GCC and their, neighbors, particularly Iran and Iraq, that will, lead to, say, if we can say so, permanent peace. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Saleh, also for sort of outlining already positions that you think the GCC can consider at the outset. I'm going to go to, there've already been a number of questions posted in the chat, and we've had a couple of people raise their hand. I don't know if there's any comment right now from the panel that you want to come in at this stage, or I will just continue on. Dr. Abdelaziz, you are
No,
muted.
I think you can continue with
Okay.
the question now, at least to
Okay.
give a chance to respond to it.
No, sure, I will go that. Maybe, I mean, Saleh, since you mentioned already the root causes of the conflict, I'll take one of the first questions out of the chat, maybe for you, mentioning that do you then think a two-state formula will possibly lead to a permanent solution of de-escalation in the Middle East, and whether the extension of the Abraham Accords will pave way for that permanent peace? I'm hearing from the panel a little bit, there's a lot of question marks. It's more likely that we see a continuation of some conflict, maybe even further de-escalation at some point. How do you see that then, Saleh, in terms of putting that emphasis on the two-state? Will that be the main thing one should consider doing? I just see if Saleh can again unmute himself.
Yes, Christian.
Yeah.
I think not just the region, I mean, the international community came to the conclusion that without a two-state solution, there will never be a peace in the region. But the problem here is that this government in Israel is totally against the two-state solution. So there has to be more pressure. And as I said, normalization should be a condition. Just like stated by Saudi Arabia, you cannot normalize without, Israel committing to a two-state solution. Is that a possibility? I'm not sure. With this kind of government in Tel Aviv, I don't think there is going to be a possibility. But maybe with this war, I mean, one of the, maybe the impact of this war and the damage being done to Israel, maybe they will start debating this issue. Hopefully, I don't know how it's going to reflect on the next government, but that's the only hope. I mean, besides the position of the Trump administration, I don't see them that they are pushing or they are convinced about the two-state solution. They were not happy about the conference that was supposed to, the two-state solution that was supposed to be held in New York. So unless the Americans change their position as well, and the Israeli government change their position, and they come to the conclusion they cannot have peace in this region, and they cannot be engaged, and integrated into this region, I don't see a possibility of the two-state solution.
Okay, great. Maybe also take that question and to Dr. Abdelaziz. We had a similar question that came from Paul Arts, also on the normalization between KSA and Israel, and explaining what kind of Saudi interests would really be served if the country one day finally agrees to normalize relations with Israel. Would you like to look at that?
Yeah, I think Saudi Arabia remains very much committed to the two-state solution, and unless there is a viable Palestinian state, Saudi will not normalize with Israel. I mean, the Israelis are trying all their best, but I think they should not forget what they have done and what sort of genocide they have committed and what sort of damage they have created in Gaza, where they get 1.8 million people out of their place. That's not to release 100 prisoner. When they wanted, they went to Iran with 900 airstrike going after different locations. They have the information, they have the intelligence, they have the satellite. There was no need to do all this damage in Gaza and to kill the people, children and women and elderly people, and to do what they are doing. All what the Palestinians want today is an immediate stop of the war, release of the humanitarian, remove some of the damages, and then gradually bring life to a place. And then they're willing to settle. I mean, they're no longer talking about Hamas militant leadership to be there, and they're not talking about possessing any military capability there. So it's unless they come into terms, Saudi Arabia will not normalize.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Let me try to go to two of our participants who've raised their hand in the chat, and we'll try to open the microphone for you. Ibrahim Aziz, you had your hand up very, very early in the session. If you can hear me, the microphone is now open for you, and you can come in with your question or short comment.
Yes, thank you very much for all of you. And my name is Dr. Ibrahim Aziz from Kurdistan, Iraq. I'm lecturer at University of Salahuddin, International Relations. The reason why I early raised my hand because of the Abdulaziz Sakar. I got some comments, just one question and comments. Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz, for your remarks. And I am coming to the point, the Saudi Arabia's role in that 12 days conflict between Iran and Israel. I think so. In particular, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has demonstrated significant diplomatic skill and played a crucial role in the escalation efforts. The points you refer to, the goal of GCC positions toward Iran in one side and Israel as well, and then the aggression toward Qatar as a sovereign country. My question is, in that particular thing, is will the GCC act as a mediator or not? Because in my point of view, I think while Saudi Arabia may claim or to act within the framework of the international law, the broader consequences of this regional tensions are affecting the entire Middle East. We as a Kurds, we are also experiencing the impact of this dynamic is firsthand. I think we all pay or paid in somehow the cost of the price of the consequences of 12 days war. Then in case for starting a war, we will pay more or not. The diplomatic skill is crucial, especially by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He can play the biggest role to prevent that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. I'll come to you in just a minute, Dr. Abdulaziz. I just want to bring in, also take the second question from Professor Dankspek-Gruber. Your microphone is now there, so you can come in also and join the discussion if you can hear me. Again, this might have been early on, so...
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Good
you
morning.
can hear me. Okay, please go ahead, Wolfgang.
Yeah. Thank you. And wonderful conversation on expertise, and I want to congratulate you for this. This is the first time that I hear sort of really sort of a bit more insight perspective. I'm calling you from Princeton, New Jersey, but I call you in spirits from Geneva. And let me begin with two key notions. First of all, very old American, it ain't over till it's over. It's not over. As many of you indicated, we are sort of in a lull, perhaps, or whatever. Secondly, very importantly, the first casualty of any conflict is, one of you mentioned communication, correct? Next one is truth, a reality. And it all runs its time. And for them, it will take tenacity. So that's one element which we have to keep in mind. The other one is the Geneva element. I was educated by Jacques Frémont and Kurt Gasteiger in Geneva. And I learned, especially from Kurt, the hard way, you can operate with your own power or by purchased power or by borrowed power. And as I think especially Giacomo brought in, this has opened an entire new Pandora's box in regard to nuclear non-proliferation. And I had recently Pakistan's most senior ambassador with me in Princeton, coincidentally just when we had the 4-day war, that's what some people call it. Shall I remind us about the statements by Pakistan when the 12 days developed, and especially when just before the attack of the intervention of the United States? And that leads me to a real ominous question. I experienced in Princeton with Frank von Hippel, the eminent nuclear scientist, the India-Pakistan saga. And I know for a fact how the United States and all information services were completely taken aback when India detonated the weapon. I cannot even tell you the shockwaves running through the Princeton science campuses here when a couple of weeks later, Pakistan detonated the weapon. And I want to remind us that both Medvedev and Vladimir Putin shook their waves last week and saying, well, we can also always provide friends with the devices. Let's also not forget that there are hundreds of millions of Islamic people who observe that from afar. And I think we have to bring these elements in as well. But I want to end here with a really positive thing. Speaker, which goes completely in my thing. We have, and you have, and I help as much as I can. We have to keep going the engagement. Otherwise, we shall end like 1871 till 1918. German, Franco-Prussian wars. We have to engage on whatever means. And your GRC and our Liechtenstein colloquium, track 1.5 on all kinds of levels. We cannot have no engagement anymore. That's not the way. And we should never fall into the trap to think it's over now, just because people want to make check. Next one. That's not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wolfgang, for that. Dr. Abdelaziz, you want to come in also on the question before on the...
Well, first let me thank Professor Wolfgang. His voice sounded a little bit cold with the hot weather in Geneva, but I wish him all the best. And thank you for your comment, Professor Wolfgang. With regard to the question about mediation, I think if we go back to the Qatari statement immediately after the attack on Udeid, and in Qatar, Qatar stated, yes, they will continue be open for mediation. They will still be open for dialogue in the region. They will still keep their active. Saudi Arabia, I think, by the visit of the Saudi Minister of Defense, prior to this attack to Iran, I think still Saudi remains open for any sort of mediation. We have mediated between Ukraine, Russia, the Russian and the American. We provided the necessary platform for the discussion between both of them. I think today, what do we want from Iran? How can we get Iran engaged in the region? There are key issues. One, Iran traditionally decided to deal with militia, but not to deal with state. So they have to change that attitude and deal with the state in the region. Second, Iran have threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, the Navy issues, so they have to remove that sort of notion of maritime threat. Iran have threatened attack against a sort of a refinery or oil field or anything that related to energy. Iran supported militia in Iraq and in Lebanon, and so they need to stop that one. If Iran behave as a state, we have as a people in the region, we have all the respect for the Iranian people as a people. We understand their culture, they are our neighbor, we live together. But at the same time, we need that sort of attitude to change. And this is why I started by saying positive signal yesterday from the Iranian president, talking about the good relation with the Gulf. I think if they carried on in that notion, that will bring things, and Saudi will be always willing, happy to do mediation, to bring the parties together. We did interfere on lifting the sanction in Syria, and it was very successful. And I think also they will be happy to work together. But then Iran need to change their behavior. They need to send a clear signal and willingness for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. John, Giacomo, any other comments on also what Wolfgang mentioned? Anything from your side you want to come in with at this stage? Giacomo.
Yes, I thank, first of all, Professor Wolfgang, please, if you have a chance, give my regards to Frank von Hippel and all the crowd at Princeton. It was about 10 years ago that at the end of my term as Princeton Global Scholar, we organized a conference on nuclear energy and non-proliferation in the Gulf. And the issue has remained unaddressed and unresolved. There are huge flaws in the non-proliferation treaty, and these are becoming more and more clear. You know, there is the president of North Korea that has just decided to leave the non-proliferation treaty and has been able to proliferate. There is a president of Israel that has never signed the non-proliferation treaty and has acquired a nuclear weapon, although it's not officially acknowledged, but you know, it's more and more thinly veiled secret. There is the president of India and Pakistan and so on and so forth. Now, we are in a juncture in which nuclear energy is increasingly appearing as an essential component of the energy of the future in a non-carbon carbon world, okay? So it is not possible to tell any government, any state that we don't like so much that they should not enrich uranium. The right of enriching uranium is enshrined in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So that has to be respected. There must be effective ways of making sure that the enriched uranium is used for civilian purposes and not for military purposes. I think this is a feasible target, and we just simply need to devote more attention, more resources to making sure that engagements are being respected. In this respect, the attitude and the policy of the United States is not very helpful, and they might succeed in postponing the Iranian nuclear program, perhaps for a long time, if Dr. Mustafa is right about the effectiveness of the strikes, but that doesn't solve the problem, because the problem is not Iran. The problem is the right to enrich uranium globally, and it touches South Korea and so many other countries, and it touches Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, because Saudi Arabia has so far refused to sign the so-called 123 treaties. Okay, so that has to be tackled, and I hope, frankly, Dr. Abdulaziz, I think this is something the GRC should be working on, and perhaps in association with Princeton, it would be a beautiful link, but it is something that should attract our immediate and total attention.
You know,
Please.
Professor Giacomo, in 2004, we had the initiative at the GRC, a Gulf-free zone of WMD, and you were part of that one. I think
Exactly.
even we brought the Iranian, the Iraqi, the Yemeni, everybody into the table. The Iranian always accused this initiative by saying, if the Israeli did not sign to NPT and they don't want to be part of the Middle East free zone of WMD, why should we be part of that one? This is the whole issue. So Israel until today are not recognizing or are not declaring their possessing of the nuclear capability. And they said we are not a signatory to the NPT, neither to the additional protocol, while Iran is a signatory to NPT and to additional protocol. So I think this is the big debate here. And the question is, where can we use the leverage of the US pressure to have a real Middle East free zone of WMD? That's a big issue, but we will continue, and I think we are continuing our effort, of course, on the nuclear issue in the region, because I know Saudi today they want to build the small medium reactor, for the data center, and for that data center you need to have this capability, but still, as you rightly said, they refuse to sign the 123. So that still is a big open issue.
Yeah. I think what is new is the climate of detente in the Gulf, the wish to establish a new framework of cooperations amongst the Gulf countries. And that may perhaps allow some more fruitful discussions that we weren't able to have in the past. We should persevere in this line. We should insist. It is in many ways one of the most important issues that we need to tackle.
Let me also take this forward to Mustafa and also tie it to the question from Michael Backfish in the chat, saying that how could a regional management of a civilian nuclear program look like regarding GCC countries in Iran? Will the Iran regime join this effort? And then he has a third question, since you mentioned also the damage done to the nuclear program in Iran. How concerned are the GCC countries that Iran succeeds in building a nuclear bomb and be able to threaten the region? Mustafa.
Yeah, first we have a very funny, very ridiculous scenario. We witness really a funny scenario. Two nuclear states attacking a non-nuclear state to prevent this state from becoming nuclear. This is what we witness, But at the end of the day, you cannot compare apple with orange. Iran under international obligation, Iran signed NPT, willingly, voluntarily, agree to the principle that they will never develop a military nuclear capability. Israel, Pakistan, India, they never done that. So they are not, okay, wrong or right, doesn't matter. The question here, if we're talking about international obligation, they are not under international obligation not to develop nuclear military capability, and they done that. So here it's a completely different issue. The Iranian is under obligation, as Saudi Arabia, as Bahrain, as everybody, like, you know. When you start to cheat on your international obligation and try to have two-track nuclear program, this is the problem. The problem here is okay, you have, this is regrettably, we reach a point that international community, especially the West, start to legitimize the Israeli-American military attack on Iran as a legitimate action for a very simple reason, because they think what Iran was doing is illegitimate as well. So, okay, we don't know, but now how you can prevent Iran? First, you have to make rebuilding the program physically a very difficult task. You have to remember, Iran depend on smuggling all the system of the underground network to obtain all the equipment and all the capability to reach the point. This must be, you know, this was in during Cold War when this allowed. It is the same lesson when Pakistan, everybody was saying the Pakistani will never be able to build the bomb because 50% of the population are under the line of, you know, they are poor, they cannot eat, how are they going to build the bomb? And you took a relaxed attitude, then you discover one day the Pakistani build the bomb, or the Indian as well, okay? So the question here, if the Iranian going to, you know, go ahead again and build the program, I think that so far, international community generated enough pressure on Iran to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear military capability. The problem now is the second stage, how to prevent Iran from rebuilding. I think the intelligence and even the military intervention, it is on the table. It is an option, and it is openly, it is option. So here we're talking about open-ended conflict. If the Iranian going to decide not to abandon their objective of obtaining military nuclear program, I think we are going to see instability in the region, endless instability in the region. So the hope, again, I will repeat what the hope, as a member, as people in the region, we don't want to see this. We don't want to see Iran to be destroyed again. We don't want to see the conflict. Iran, a signature to the NPT, why the Iranian didn't obey the NPT like what the Saudis and the other country? This is a simple question. When you enrich to 60%, you expect people to put you under in the radar. Because what you're doing with this sort of behavior raises suspicion and legitimize, you know, action against you. So if the Iranian want to end this, I think that it is the ball in their play, not in anybody's else.
Great, thank you, Mustafa. John, do you want to come in with any comment? Just want to give you an opportunity in case there's something you wanted to mention.
Too much politics.
Yes, well,
You're all talking about politics. I think I agree with Mustafa's point that it's in Iran's net, or the ball is on now their side to determine how they want to respond. However, what we've seen over the last 2 years is that Middle East politics is first decided in Jerusalem, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to say it. And from there on, the decision of Israel to go after the regime will appropriately replace and structure the map of the Middle East. So I think the powers be are changing very quickly, as we said. And so I think that there is a bigger plan of restructuring the map, and that plan has nothing to do with engagement. And I think you need to change the way we're looking at things from our own perspective, we see things as if it's normal. I think we're in a new post-modern Middle East where there is no normalcy and no engagement. The decisions taking place somewhere else outside of what we used to call the Middle East.
Okay, well, thanks, Giacomo. I think that's actually a good point to bring the discussion to a close. This will require another seminar, another webinar, of course, on what that post-Middle East will look like. I do think that at the moment, the message I hear from a lot of you is that at least as far as the GCC states are concerned, that there should be some doubling down on the de-escalation and outreach strategy of engagement, of trying to find ways in which some of these issues can be better looked at, better managed, in the hope that we don't end up in the scenario of the open-ended conflict, as was mentioned. But again, let me thank you all again for all of your comments. It was very, very insightful. Unfortunately, always 90 minutes is too short to cover the whole issues, and we left a lot of things still on the table. But of course, this is also what we can do then in upcoming webinars. So I'd like to thank you all for your input. Thank you everybody else behind the scenes at the GRC for the work always to keep the webinars going. Please keep consulting our website where you see recent commentary and analysis reports. Also, do look out for our Strategic Survey 2025 publication, which is going to be released very soon, probably around July 15th. Just wanted to alert you that already. And of course, keep a lookout for further webinar announcements in the coming weeks. So thanks a lot for joining us, and hope to see you very soon at another GRC event. And a great rest of the day or early evening to most of you. Bye-bye.